Welcome everybody to the Winds of Spirit book study. I'm Brigid Hopkins, and today we're going to be discussing chapter 3, Wind Intensities. And first, I would like to take a moment with all of the participants to do a visualization that came to me before our call today. So this is hot off the presses, right off the winds. So go ahead and take a moment, everyone. If you're driving, keep your eyes open. But if you're in a place where you can just pause for a moment and close your eyes, maybe even get into a seated position, I'll encourage that. And I also support whatever feels best for you. So just take a moment to close your eyes and settle in to your location, wherever that may be, indoors or out, in motion or still. And just imagine that the wind begins blowing on you. And notice in what direction it's gracing your body. Is it coming in on the front of you, the sides, or the back? And I'd like for you to notice if you see a color. For me, I see a light pink, but that may be a different color for you. And as this wind continues to grace your body, imagining that color, begin to see yourself as a conduit or like a tube where the energy flows into you and then it goes down into the earth. It also goes out the top of your crown up to the sky. And as it continues to flow, I encourage you to begin sending it out in your environment. Sending it out into your city, to your state. Remembering that the wind is ever expansive and so are you, and it can just keep going and growing. There's no limitation here. And now with your imagination, send it to all of the adjacent states to you. And you can probably feel by now that this energy is ever loving and gentle and kind. And as you're continuing to allow it to flow through you into your environment, into your city, into the entire state, and now all of the adjacent states, let's keep sending that energy of love and kindness and care all the way around the globe, knowing that it's traveling on these winds that are entering from whatever direction, moving through our bodies with our intentions, and growing and growing. And just really feel the sensations that are moving through you. Knowing that this is available to us any time of day, anywhere that we are. The winds are always present. And now start bringing your attention back into the room where you are. Wiggling your toes, wiggling your fingers, and coming all the way back into this moment. So thank you everyone for joining us. I did share a few moments ago that this call is not only recorded, but it will be shared on Renee Baribeau's YouTube channel. And so I had asked the earlier attendees if they could give a thumbs up, but for the new attendees, I would just like to ask for your consent, that you're comfortable with your sharing being known publicly. Let's go ahead and give a thumbs up if it's okay for you. Thank you. Well, welcome everyone to chapter 3. And I'm going to go ahead and unmute you so we can all say hello to one another. And feel free to help me out here if you'd like to unmute yourself, that's fine. Thank you.
Hello, Brigid. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Gail.
Hi, Gail.
Hello.
Hi, Carrie.
Hi,
Denise.
this is Deborah.
Yeah.
Hi, Deborah. Hi, Denise. I saw you on there, but I couldn't unmute you. Welcome.
I think I unmuted myself.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Where do I leave a thumbs up? I can't find that part, though.
That's okay. Do I have your consent? I don't think you're on video, so that's why I was asking for the thumbs up.
Okay. Good to go.
Okay. Thank you. The only other thing I wanted to share with everyone that's here today is if you're putting questions in the chat box, it is slightly difficult for me to see the chat while I'm hosting the call. So after the call or towards the end of the call, I'll make sure to go and check the questions and answer them if I have the answer as best I can before we end our call together, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. So, chapter 3, who would like to go and share, what came up for you while reading this about the wind intensities?
Okay, I'll try. Just like the winds change, so do our lives. And there's periods of time in our lives where the gales will just take you miles and miles and miles and miles away. And then there's times where you're heading straight into that wind and you're fighting it with all your must and vigor. And you just, it might be tough, but it's a go. And then there's times where the tailwinds are right there and they're blowing you into a new chapter of your life. So that's what I kind of got out of it.
Yeah, and did you have a relatable moment, like when you were reading that, you're like, wow, now I really can understand that circumstance that happened to me and how, what that wind intensity was or the wind dynamic?
It's so deep. I mean, as many times as my life course has changed, now I can relate to the storms and the gales and the calmness and the doldrums, and so life is ever changing and it's unpredictable. But with the winds either against you or with you, you're either struggling to get somewhere in your life or you're thrown into something that is different from what you're used to. So, and then there's always those side winds that come at you, and yeah, that's what I got out of it.
Great, thank you so much.
Sure.
Who would like to go next?
I'll share.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're in the U.S. where I am. We have hurricane season and Dorian is storming. So, and I was just reflecting on, and I shared a little bit about this on the Facebook group. When we are in a hurricane, the judgment is that the wind is bad. Just like if we stick our finger in an electric socket, we're going to judge that electricity is bad. But when we have the gentle wind and we're all, enjoying the wind, then we have a totally different experience. And that was, I mean, thinking about, you know, just where we are at any time of the day, the winds are changing our experience. But it was making me think about the question that Renee brought storming in last week about the wind as God and all universal, all powerful energy. And that's the same way as we are. If something bad is happening in life, we can tend to, you know, question, you know, why is this happening to me? I'm a good person type of thing. And judge spirit when it, you know what I'm saying? Like, and so there are these intensities that I think as you go through life, you make sense of it all over time. But I was just reflecting on that, and I had shared about how I had that experience of fear of the wind when it was a hurricane and a tree was knocked down and took the porch right off my house when I was like a senior in high school. And so I've been fascinated by storms and hurricanes and tornadoes and the power and the vulnerability that, you know, we don't get faced with all that often in modern life, if we're lucky. But if we're not so lucky, like people sitting in the eye of the storm, it's all perspective as well. So that's where I was. That's where I've been this week because of the hurricane.
Yeah, well, and it's so interesting, Carrie, that you shared that element of it, because I had this experience just yesterday, and I wouldn't have realized that it was, sorry, I'm just going to mute whoever this is real quick. I wouldn't have realized that it was instead of the wind intensity. Gail, I keep muting you just for a second, dear. It's really loud, your background. Yeah, it's okay. I'm just going to mute you again. Hold on one second. There we go. Let's see here. Okay. There we go. But it's really interesting that you bring up that, Carrie, you know, the judgment around it, you know, being good or bad and the intensity of it and how we can stand in that storm, so to speak. And I had this experience just yesterday where someone's inner wind, right? So it wasn't the hurricane that's happening. It was like an internal hurricane. And this velocity came at me. And in that moment, I thought, if I were listening to the voice of God right now, not the person that I see in front of me, but if it was actually the voice of God coming through this person with that gusto, would I reject it? Would I look away? Would I defend it? What would I really do? How would I want to interact with that? Because right now I feel really overwhelmed and small, but that's my perception. And that's not why the situation's happening. It's not here to disempower me. It's here to ask me, you know, how do you really want to engage when things are out of my control, so to speak? It was really powerful. And so, you know, that idea that you're playing with of like, with the storms and how we think of the wind, and is the wind, you know, the ever-present and powerful God, you know, that experience took me to a new understanding of this initial conversation that Renee threw in and how it keeps building, so to speak, just like a wind intensity, right? It just starts out as a gentle breeze and picks up more momentum. And that's what I'm actually experiencing directly in my life in this moment. So thank you for that share. All right.
Sure.
Who's next?
Yes, it's a matter of like, we have the nature winds, but we have those internal, but also it's subtle energy as well as strong energy, and it is very powerful. Yeah. Thank you.
And so are we, right?
Yeah.
I think that I think that's the misnomer, is like, whoo, this is bigger than me, or it feels more powerful than me. But if we're still standing, is it really more powerful than us?
Right.
No. Yeah. I have goosebumps. I don't know what it all means. I have no idea. It means something. So for those just joining us, we started the conversation. We were just throwing in some of the things that really stood out for us from chapter 3. So please feel free to jump in. There's no specific order here.
I'd like to jump in if I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Deborah, sure. Yes, I can.
Okay. I have long been fascinated with storms and standing in them and allowing the rain to pour down on me and the wind to blow me, since I was small. So as I grew older and maybe a little wiser, I also learned to respect the wind. Those hurricane force winds are nothing to be standing in. So I've learned the respect, and I'm here in this group because, as I've shared on the wall, I have spent a number of years developing my relationship with the other elements, with the earth and the water and the fire. But I realized I had not spent time with the wind, and I knew it was time. I had some signals and some relationships with wind since May that it was obvious I needed to pay attention. So I was real happy to see this book club. And what I like is tools. I've been collecting tools to help me and others to learn how to deal with the chaos that we live in, whether it's internal or external or both. And so when on page 29, when she says to hone the qualities, hone these qualities to keep you steady in rough waters. That part spoke to me. That's not exactly quoted, but that's the message of it. And the qualities, these tools are surrender, acceptance, devotion, forgiveness, and mindfulness. So I like that. I've worked with each of these, but to master them, will make a difference in this development of my relationship with the wind. And so the other thing that I liked very much was on page 32, the wind intensities, because for me, that's a perspective. Okay, where's the wind coming from? Because I haven't really taken much time to look at this before. So thinking about a tailwind and what that means, and a headwind and how to learn to dance with it, or crosswinds or gales. I belong to a nature-based spiritual community, and we have monthly sweat lodges and annual earth dances and vision quests. And I have been, we gather on a acreage that is about 500 or 600 acres. So we have our privacy for these things. And it's over the years, the land has really soaked in the sacredness of our ceremonies. And so one of the things I noticed early on, because I've been with them about 12 years, was the weather is different there, especially during a vision quest, than it is in the surrounding areas. And so I've been learning to pay attention to that. That's where I learned to respect it. And we have a practice of asking the weather beings to accept us there for the few days that we're there, to allow us permission to be there. And also I make a practice of asking the weather beings to allow me to dance with them, not against them. And so those are the things I've learned about wind. And now I'm really excited about this study because I like to spend a lot of time developing, my relationship with the elements, or with we honor 8 directions. So there's more besides the 4 basic elements. And I would spend a year or more with each one. and I love that because then it becomes embedded. And that's where I'm at with this. I'm just beginning this journey, and I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you.
So glad that you're here. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm almost 3 years in, and I still feel like I'm just beginning to integrate. The wind is a different, it just has such a different zest to itself. But the thing that you said that really struck me, and I think when we're talking about these dynamics and the intensities of them, is beginning with the question, right? Asking instead of assuming why this is happening or how it's affecting you. Right? If we're in a relationship and we want to know more with questions.
Yes. Love questions.
And and so that is just like, boom, big, bright aha came through. That we call those wind epiphanies in the group. So thank you. That was great.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Who else has a share from chapter 3 that they'd like to put in to our circle here today? Don't be shy. You're welcome to jump in.
I'm walking down the road, so I probably have some cars coming through. So I'll contribute a bit later when I'm in a quieter space.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Gail. Well, one of the things that stands out to me too, after what Deborah just shared and also what Carrie was sharing, and I hadn't really thought about that before, and then Jim popped on and I was like, oh, there's our sailor, our anchor, right? So with all these different intensities, some of them really require an anchor. And that wasn't one of the questions I had intended to ask today, but I just feel it moving through me. And I'm curious, like, how do we anchor ourselves in the most intense circumstances so that we don't lose our bearings? Or we may find a new way to be with, the bearings that are coming, but we don't have to be completely derailed, right? So I don't really know how to ask that question other than, do you currently have an anchor, or have you been given the opportunity to develop one because of the different intensities in your life?
If I could jump in again.
Go ahead.
Oh, Jim, go ahead. You go ahead, Jim.
Okay. No picture today. I'm still driving. Ran late at work.
Okay.
But I was thinking about your question, Brigid, in terms of flow. Because I had sat down a while ago and it wasn't wind, but it was actually with water. I felt at times like I was water flowing down a river under a bridge, and then I was the rock and the water was kind of pinned up against me. And I noticed that at different times in my life, as an anchor, different things anchor me, and then other times I find myself floating free. So when we talk about going with the flow and that wind, being able to sense kind of what the direction of all this is. We can be fighting as that anchor against the wind, and it doesn't do much good, but at the same time, persisting in places where we know we're right is important. I think it's learning to just kind of trust, our ability to feel, to sense that wind and the direction where we need to go is what really is important. And I say that with one other thought from my walking quest. I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago before the course had started, but I was out walking and feeling the wind, and I got a different sensation that the wind wasn't more wind as opposed to just kind of waves of energy flowing over or floating by. So when I look at it, it's like, you know, do we sense the wind? It's like sense the energy in a room. You know, and a fun example of that is we're out looking for a new car and trying to decide, well, which way is the wind taking us in the new car purchase? Do we want to get one now? Is it something we want to do later? You know, just something easy that we can work with. But to have something that easy and pay attention to the wind now and just see, well, you know, where is my heart taking me? Where is my wife's heart want to go? Is the time now? Is it a little bit later? And to kind of allow ourselves to float in that breeze and just see where this is going to take us is kind of an exhilarating experience now. Just more awakened.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, based on what you're sharing, I do have a question for you because I personally do not sail or have a boat. Are there different depths that you drop an anchor, or does it always go straight to the bottom? Like, can you drag it, so to speak, just to kind of slow the boat down a little bit without like keeping it in place?
It depends on the type of boat as to how you anchor it. So I worked for the Department of Defense for a while. So if you had a Navy warship, you anchor the boat by dropping the anchor and then a huge ton of chain on top of that. So the anchor is a small part of the anchor. The anchor is really the big, massive pile of chain that's sitting at the bottom of the ocean. You know, with the smaller boat, you can drop the anchor. The wind then, you know, the anchor kind of catches or snags the ground and pulls the boat around and lines you up into the wind to feel the breeze. You know, and even a smaller boat, you just drag it up on the beach, tied around a tree.
Oh, this seems pretty simple. Thank you. That's cool. I was really curious about that. Appreciate it, Jim. Good luck with your car purchase if you move forward.
Right. Yeah, thank you. So a funny thing now, we're going still down the road on anchors. We watched below deck, and they actually dropped an anchor, which then got tangled with somebody else's old anchor in line. So even though we sit down or try and find a spot to anchor, that anchor could be misplaced or get tangled in someone else's old remnants of stuff. And to be able to sort through and clear that as well so that we have a true solid place to anchor and move forward from might be important.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, and that takes me to one of the things that I had noticed while reading about the different intensities. So, you know, we had the tailwind, headwind, crosswind, gales, intermittent, doldrums. And as I was reading through all of the descriptions about them, it really brought to the picture for me of how some of my anchoring and non-surrender and non-devotion, right? So the winds are my teachers. So I'm trying to learn how to be more fluid and let go. And what my anchor was were these stories, patterns of behavior. And I could really see how they mirrored some of the different intensities, or they were used in a way to grow intensity, almost to build velocity in my life. And it wasn't always for a positive. It didn't always bring change. Now they bring more change because I'm more aware of them. But when you're not aware of it, the story really can become an anchor. And I don't necessarily know that that's a help or hindrance. You know, that's up for each person to decide. But it was just something that came to mind while I was reading through that chapter.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
It took me until just now to figure out that I had to unmute myself. Does the fact that all of these hurricanes are man-made and geoengineered, how does that, I mean, I have this question in my mind, how does that impact my ability to use shamanic work with, you know, the man-made weather?
So when you say man-made, are you speaking more of like how we contribute based on what's happening inside of us? Is that what you mean?
I'm talking about the over 100 HARP installations around the world who mess with the weather in every kind of way. Every hurricane is caused by them. They are now planned and implemented by the Illuminati overlords who are, in charge of everything. And this is a real thing. There's even a patent for weather manipulation. And it's considered conspiracy theory, but the reality is it's fact.
Well, it's interesting because I don't really have a lot of knowledge about any of that or understanding really.
Right.
So I don't know that I would have a good answer for you in like a real logical sense, but in more of a symbolic sense,
Yeah.
and again, thinking about partnering with the winds, if the winds are being manipulated, how can we help that with our intentionality? Because you are not being manipulated with your intention.
Right.
So that's where I would start.
Okay.
Being clear in your intention. Not coming from any place of worry, doubt, or fear, but being in a place of love and care and progress. So really envisioning what the outcome is that you're intending.
Okay.
Hope that
Okay.
helps.
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
You're welcome. I have you muted, Cheryl. Would anyone else like to go?
I'd like to add a comment about what I think I'm using as an anchor. I've lived with anxiety most of my life. And so I've been finding ways to balance things out for quite a few years. And what I've noticed is the best anchor for me is the breath, is using breathing techniques that I've learned, consciously breathing. And I have a variety of techniques, so I bring in whatever speaks to me at the time. But anchoring seems to be the breath and also images that of experiences in nature. So that combination works really well. And in my dissertation, I wrote about what came to me over the years is little what I call recipes. They're like shape-shifting recipes. So if I'm really anxious or depressed or in a really bad place, the first one that came to me through a wonderful indigenous woman in Dreamtime, she was a grandmother, and she taught me that I had been using breath and motion. So yoga, qigong, even stillness as the motion part, and some type of breathing. And she said, include gratitude. So breath, motion, and gratitude was my first recipe. And it's amazing how with using that intentionally, all those parts, bringing them together, can shape-shift the mood, the place you're at. So I do it primarily in nature. I step outside because that makes a huge difference. So that's sort of how I anchor myself through the breath is really great, images, and my recipes, which I have a number of now. Thanks.
Beautiful, thank you.
So, may I add one more thought on anchoring?
Absolutely.
So, after we talked, Brigid, I was just sitting here thinking about the anchor. And whatever we called our anchor, in the end, the purpose of it, or what it does, is point us kind of square into the wind. So a boat will always drift around the anchor and then point upwind. I think somewhere in there we talked about airplanes, and why do airplanes fly upwind? Because it provides a lift. So in a sense, an anchor would really orient us to the wind and provide a place of lift, which is always a place, to me, of perspective. So in the middle of that storm, anchoring can provide kind of a bigger look or a higher perspective on the whole thing. And then a way to, I guess, move forward from there. Pull up the anchor and then begin to sail forward again.
Yeah. What a great way you just bundled all of that up in a really succinct way. Thank you. I get a little windy over here, so I love it. Thank you, Jen.
I guess our
Hi, Gail.
Hello. I'm trying to get. By the time I unmute, somebody's talking, so I thought it's not my time. So I guess the anchoring we're talking about is really about discernment, isn't it? Because if you anchor yourself in the midst of a storm, right in the eye, that's where the calm is. But if you anchor yourself, we have cyclones here. So if you anchor yourself just outside of that, you're just going to get torn to pieces. So the discernment comes on when to anchor for the good of me and when not to anchor. And I've been working a bit with, when you were doing a meditation in the opening, what came to mind was hot air balloons. And so if you anchor a hot air balloon because you don't want it to move, that's fine. But really, it needs to travel with the wind. And the way we decide which direction we want to go is by how high we travel. I don't know if you've been in a hot air balloon, but how it works is if you can imagine channels of wind across the sky, and if you draw them in horizontal panels and then give them all a different texture, color them all a different texture or a different pattern, then you'll see that there are different patterns, there are different wind directions that are in the sky. So when you're in a hot air balloon, if you travel 500 feet, you're going to go in a different direction to 800 feet or down to 200 feet. And so that's the way they change direction. And I guess we're a lot like that, aren't we? If we don't like the direction we're traveling, we can just re-navigate and take a different direction.
Yeah, that's great, Gail. Thank you. And, between you and Carrie, you keep taking me back to the same point, and I'm still trying to figure out how to say it. But basically what I'm trying to say is that no matter the intensity, yes, the discernment and the awareness, right, of our choice point, instead of feeling at the mercy of or victimized by or victimized, or the victim of, we have a choice point. And it might be microscopic. It could literally be 1 second, but it was there. And do we know that? Do we see it? And do we take advantage of it? It's an opportunity.
And it's exactly what you were saying about asking questions. A lot of times, because we have the patterns come up and we use them automatically, and they become our anchor. Whereas we don't really want an anchor at that time. You don't want to drive a Ferrari in second gear or with the brakes on. You want to put it in fourth or fifth or sixth gear and let it fly with the wind. And so there are your questions again, is this a pattern that's coming up for me? Do I want this pattern, or do I want to go with the wind this time?
Yeah. And can I trust it, right? Isn't that like the overarching question? Can I trust it?
Well, that would not be a question I would ask, because that would be asking, can I trust me? Can I trust the universe? Can I trust my guides? And I guess, no, I wouldn't ask that of me. So if you're asking that, that's a great place to start, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Thank you, Gail. Anyone else want to jump in?
I'll just add one thing. You had asked about the anchors, and for me, that is definitely the breath, but it's also trees and nature. But Jim's been making me think about the anchor and what he mentioned about like anchors getting tangled or entangled. It was like similar. I get this idea that that's similar to cutting cords and how that could be helpful in a meditation, and then like what I was speaking about when I first started the share about the winds, and I mentioned that perspective, like where do we stand in any situation is perspective. And then he brought that back, that point about the anchors in perspective. So I can't wait to kind of listen back to this because there's a lot of about that, like, you know, what I was talking about with the storms. But a lot about, like, yeah, just that's all I just wanted to share is just that idea about sometimes we have to cut the anchor and get free and let the wind redirect. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah, that was really good. Yeah. And go ahead. Whoever was going to speak, go ahead.
Well, we have all different patterns from our perspectives, don't we? I remember a friend of mine when I was about 8 or 9. She wrote me a letter and she said, "Oh, we've just been through a cyclone," and I said, "Oh, wow." From a young person's perspective, that's really exciting. As an adult, it's a little different. And so I said, "What do you remember?" And she said, "Oh, she said it was amazing." She said, "We saw the chooks fly past the window." And that was her perspective, is that this was an exciting adventure that was happening. And I think we lose a lot of that because of what we're talking about, is that lack of trust. It's like, I'm not sure what's going to happen. Am I going to be okay? And so we then put all those anxieties and create patterns into feeling fearful around that.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think is really interesting, thank you, Gail. Yeah, I mean, not only the intensity and the perspective, but, you know, that wonder, fullness and curiosity, and they just, you know, what are happening, it's happening, and there isn't a lot of story around it yet, right? And I just lost my train of thought, you guys. It was so good what you were sharing, Gail, and it really took me to this place. The trust.
Perspectives, young people, when you're young.
Yeah. No, I lost it. Oh, it was right there. I can't remember now. I don't know. I lost it. It'll come back if it's meant to. Oh, that's what I was going to say, is that normally when I talk to people about the wind and ask them, hey, what do you think about the wind? They're like, it's such a bother. It's always, you know, blowing at me or messing up my hair, or coming in the house and, you know, displacing things or rearranges things. You know, it's unruly is one of the favorite things that I hear people say. But to kids, like, you watch a child, they'll sit there and watch a little sandstorm on a beach, like a little sand tornado. I think they call them, like, some type of devil, like wind devils or something. And they're fascinated by it. And they're never once like, ew, that wind was too strong. And that's the difference between a child and an adult. Like, the child just sees so much potentiality there. And the adult is like, I don't want to be bothered.
That's fascinating what you were just saying, though, isn't it? Because that's the crux of it all. It's untamable, it's uncontrollable. And so therefore we begin to feel out of control. And it's a matter of, I can't control this wind, so now I'm feeling out of control. Good point.
And think about all of the relationships in our life, you guys. So we're here to build a relationship with the winds, right? But in my personal life, the more I try to bear down and control anybody, the less they want to do with me, right? And it's the same thing with the wind. We can't catch it and hold it and manipulate it and tell it what to do forever and then expect it to be a relationship. That is not a relationship. And I love what Renee says in here on page 34, where she's saying, learning to use these forces of nature will help you gather speed and strength as you begin to trust you. And I think a key point there, and it's something that I'm always working on, is how trustworthy am I in this relationship? So if I want to have a good relationship with the elements, it begins with me, my self-trust, but then it also begins with how I'm showing up and how I'm engaging. And am I asking questions, or am I forcefully stepping in and trying to tell this you know, elemental being what to do. So where does that take you guys? Oops.
I think too we can have trust in different areas, can't we? So we
Yeah.
have different areas of our lives, and we're, say if we had a scale of 1 to 10, you know, relationships that might be up on a 6 or 7, and then other things that might be down on a 1 or 2, and others up on an 8 or 9. And so I don't know that I can say that personally that I have everything on a scale quite high enough as I'd like. So therefore there are different areas I can work on in that trusting.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's the fun of it, right? We wouldn't be here if we didn't have an interest in change, or like a natural curiosity of like, how much more could I know or learn? I'm sorry, how much more can I learn and get to know about the wind? Something that's around me and in me every moment of every day that I'm not paying an ounce of attention to, or I find annoying. How can we become friends, you know? Thanks so much, Gail. I'm just going to check the time here, guys. Does anyone else have something they would like to share?
I just wanted to say that I've been really enjoying this conversation, and what I keep hearing throughout these conversations about the book and Renee's work is that there are so many lessons we can learn from the wind if we pay attention to it, right? Just like we can listen, we listen and learn to our children, we listen and learn to our mentors, or learn from our mentors and our teachers, and we take away what resonates with us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I've found so far is that just about everything Renee has written has resonated with me in one way or another, and just hearing this discussion reinforces those points that that just really make sense to me. The analogies between our lives and the wind and how we go through life. Yeah, I mean, I was trying to think of if I could connect the other elements as strongly, and yeah, I know the wind really stands out for me in that way, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a force. I see your beautiful sunflowers behind you too, Kim.
Yeah. We still got them. We got a forest of them in the backyard.
Well, they're really wind dancers, aren't they? I mean, they love the wind. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and
cool.
they love the sun too. They face the sun, right? They put their faces
Mm-hmm.
up to the sun. We just had a rainstorm. I think it was either yesterday or the day before, but we don't get like real big rainstorms or really big storms at all. I'm from the prairies, and I remember some really good ones, but the ones in the BC interior here, especially in our area, they're really short-lived. They blow in, they blow out. You know, they can blow in and make a ruckus, and then they blow out. And but for the most part, the winds are pretty gentle. And you know, I almost miss them because we don't get so much of them, right? And
Yeah.
but right now I can see the wind moving the leaves on the tree out front, and that kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, it really is a metaphor for how we look at life, the different perspectives we can bring to it, right? So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much. Glad you're here.
I see the winds as gentle guidance. So they're guiding us in a direction, and if we don't listen, they just get stronger and stronger and stronger. And it reminds me of a time when my daughter was having trouble in a ballet class, and she was about 10 years old. And I pulled up out the front and I said, you know, you don't have to go in if you don't want to. And she turned around and looked at me and said, yes, I do, Mum, because if I don't do this now, it'll just get worse and worse as I get older. And I thought, wow, where did she get that from? That was quite amazing. And it just reminds me of that, is that the winds are gentle as in the beginnings, and as we don't take any notice of what they're telling us, they just get stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger all throughout our lives.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, that's how I came to learn about headwinds. Yeah, the wind was very persistent that day. One of the things that I really enjoyed as we're wrapping up here is on page 38. It was a story about Yang Dong Homong. And she was talking about how there's a ceremony where they serve rice cakes in order to appease the wind deities and so that their rice fields aren't destroyed. And it made me think about, do we have in our collective group here, are there any traditional ceremonies that you have from your culture? It may not necessarily be directly wind related, but how could the winds become a part of the ceremony, I guess would be my question.
Well, I'll speak. I was just going to say, I think that's what we've been, you know, a piece of what we've been working on with creating wind altars. It begins there, and, you know, that's a great beginning, is creating the wind altar, and then just including the wind.
Mm-hmm.
And once you start working with it, you can't not include it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's, you know, yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Carrie.
Yeah, it brings me back to what Deborah was saying about, you know, breath. I do energy work, and you know, I use my breath in it, and you know, to either kind of distribute the energy or to loosen it up, or shift things, right? So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think it's, again, it's one of those elements that you can use throughout ceremony without even really being that conscious of it. Although it does help to be more intentional, right? Like, of course, that it enhances it if you're more intentional. So, but yeah, like I use fire, I use earth or sand, I use water. But again, the air and the wind and our breath is just kind of always there, right? Although we take it for granted a lot, right? So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Well, everyone, this has been a really rich conversation. I'm so thankful that each of you were able to attend. And I just want to share, you know, we'll be reading chapter 4 for next week, and I'll post some questions on the wall probably Wednesday, just so that you have an idea of what I would be discussing. But again, you're always encouraged to bring your own insights into the conversation. It just means a lot to me, and I know our community benefits from it. Because one perspective isn't the whole perspective, right? So one of the things that I wanted to share was on page 28, I love this one paragraph, and I wanted to think about it with all that we're seeing right now going on with the weather patterns and the storms that are happening. To heal destructive winds battering our humanity, it is imperative to do your own personal healing. Once you harmonize with your inner winds, you will be available for cooperating relationship with Mother Earth. While the wind will shake you, truth will become fixed, like the North Star in the night sky. And I just thought that that was so beautiful and a really nice way to end our time together today. And thinking about, you know, when you think about the intensities of the winds that we've discussed and how they can affect us, or ways that they have affected us, you know, how can we invite that relationship to keep us directing towards that North Star in the night sky, which I think is right. So thank you to everyone for joining. And this recorded link will go up later today on our group wall. And please feel free to continue sharing if there's something that jumps out at you after our call. You're always welcome to post that on the group, which is private. And just taking a moment, I would like to thank you again for coming and taking time out of your day to be here, and also for being active in the community. It's wonderful to see everyone's different takes on the book and their overall relationship with the wind. I continue to learn from you, so thank you so much. I hope you have a great evening. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.